Hello, my fellow aviators. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Trent, and I am the #1 fastest pilot to go from private pilot to airline pilot in just about 15 months. But that's not what we're talking about today. If you'd like to see the details on that, there will be a link down in the description. Today, we're going to be talking about the opportunity, the amazing opportunity as a cargo pilot. So if you're ready to go, let's taxi out onto the runway and take off. So about a year ago, right after my channel started really blowing up, I had quite a number of pilots reach out to me, and one of them was a captain with UPS, and he said, "Hey Trent, I've watched a number of your videos. I know you're headed off to the regionals, but I think you and the people that watch your channel, they might not be aware of the opportunities that are in cargo." He says, "I've been in cargo a long time, and he says, I really like doing it, and so I want to share with you some information that you can then share with your audience." So after speaking with him, I filmed a video. I published it, well, maybe a year ago now, and it got viewed a lot, about 120,000 times. It's one of my most successful videos. And so now that a year has passed, I thought it was time to do an update on that video. I've since met a number of other cargo captains who I've spoke to in preparation for this video. And so I want to share kind of the details of my research and my conversations with those pilots to give you guys an up-to-date sort of snapshot of the opportunity in cargo. So here's what we're going to cover in today's video. We're going to talk first about the typical Part 121, which is the airline career path. We're going to talk about some of the drawbacks of working for a regional airline when you're a new or low-time first officer. We're going to talk about the benefits of cargo, some of the major players in cargo, pay rates at various cargo companies, and then requirements to become a first officer, as well as we're going to highlight one particular cargo company that a friend of mine works at, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the video. So before we dive into cargo, let's talk about the typical Part 121 career path. After reaching 1,500 hours, the first job that many pilots, self-included, hope to get is working as a first officer for a regional airline. And in my case, I did get hired, and I'm awaiting my training class here in just about a month. So first officer pay at most regionals these days is about $90,000 a year base pay, plus whatever incentives and per diems and so forth that you might be able to add on top of that. After flying for a regional for 18 to 24 months, many pilots who are flying at regionals want to either become a captain, or maybe they go off to a major to become a regional. Now, captain pay at regionals, again, base pay right now is about $140 per hour, so roughly $140,000 a year, again, plus incentives and per diem. And then after that, the step for many pilots is to go off to, Delta or United or American or what have you, to get either maybe some international travel or some wide body time. And if you're doing any of those things, of course, your pay is going to go up a fairly meaningful amount. For pilots like me who are more interested in quality of life than maximizing the paycheck, staying at a regional may offer the ability to live near your base. And living near your base means you get to avoid commuting from your house, in my case, Boise, to maybe a base like in Seattle. And that can save a lot of time that could otherwise be spent with the family. And to me, that's pretty darn important. Before we go any further, I quickly want to mention something to you. At the beginning of this video, I said I was the #1 fastest pilot to go from private pilot to airline. And if you are interested in learning more about how to succeed with accelerated flight training, I've created a guide, and it's called the Guide to Accelerated Flight Training. And in this guide, I share everything that I learned in my 91-day sprint in flight school that it took me to go from private pilot to CFI, CFII, MEI, all for around just $50,000. So if you'd like to save a lot of money and a lot of time, there'll be another link down in the description for you. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about some potential drawbacks of working for a regional airline. First, they fly smaller planes over shorter routes, and that's going to mean lower pay and potentially more trips and more commuting days to log the same number of hours as flying for a major. And speaking of pay, so if you remember earlier, I mentioned the UPS captain, and I've now spoken to captains at the start of the video. Well, he told me that with cargo, if I joined the company I'm going to tell you about a little bit later, or any of the major cargo carriers for that matter, it's entirely possible to start your career as a first officer in a 767 and then be making as much as $250,000 within just 1 year, which is pretty darn incredible. And the UPS cap, and that's with today's UPS contract, but they're actually renegotiating that contract right now, and he tells me that they're expecting a significant boost in that. So that is a pretty whopping amount of money for what would then be a second year first officer. So if you want to stay at a regional to avoid ever having to commute like I do, then the seniority progression can slow down during economic downturns, which will delay both upgrades to captain and the improved pay that goes with it. The other thing that has always been an issue with regionals is job security. Regionals like Mesa and Spirit can be subject to mergers, route cuts, and volatile supply and demand cycles. Obviously, some regionals, like the one that I work for, have long track records of financial stability, so if you choose to go with a regional, be sure that you do your homework on the history of that airline and whether or not they've had furloughs in the past and what their financial stability looks like and what their balance sheet looks like and so forth. So now let's dive a little deeper into some of the benefits of flying for cargo. So based upon the research that I have done, the trips tend to be longer, like as much as 2 weeks in some cases, and plenty of time off between those trips. And depending upon what your lifestyle is, that might be super appealing to you. That also might mean that you have far fewer commuting days, and you can avoid these things called crash pads. So basically, think of a crash pad as like a college dorm full of pilots who are on reserve. If you don't live in your base and you're in one of these crash pads, if you're more of a mature pilot like me, you might not think that that's the most fun thing to do, so you might want to enjoy it. So when you're flying cargo and you're doing these longer trips with not as many commute days and so forth, that then gives you the ability to live kind of anywhere you want to. And in addition to being able to live anywhere you want to, you'll probably experience better job security because the freight demand tends to be steadier than passenger demand in some economic cycles. And the captains that I spoke to definitely emphasize this point of job security. So speaking of passengers, some of them can be real jerks. There's been a lot of this in the news lately where you see drunk people fighting and doing all sorts of crazy things. If you'd rather avoid having to potentially deal with that, flying cargo is going to give you that opportunity because boxes tend not to fight with each other, as well as afford you the opportunities to fly to some pretty unusual places and get some pretty insane experiences. And speaking of those experiences, the other thing that I learned when I spoke to the UPS captain, he said, because he does international flights on the 747, and he said that one of the things that he really likes about going over to Asia, for example, is oftentimes he'll have a 4 to 5 day layover. And on those days off, so to speak, he's still earning about $2,000 a day. Now, he is a senior captain. He's been there for 15 years. So if you're a first officer, you're not going to make that much. But the point of it is longer layovers. If you're younger and single and you want that travel and that adventure, having those extended layover days with pay is going to be a pretty sweet benefit, to say the least. And finally, let's not forget about that paycheck. Major cargo airlines do tend to have top tier pay scales that can sometimes meet and historically have exceeded those of the passenger airlines. Now, at this point in time, because of contract renewals at Delta, United, and American, they're ahead just for now. But again, the UPS captains that I spoke to told me that contract negotiations are about to begin, and so they expect to see a significant pay bump, which will put cargo captain pay at higher than passenger captain pay. So, for example, the guy that I talked to, he's currently earning about $50,000 per month, which is a lot of money. And if you look at the pay scale, the base pay scale for a 15-year captain at UPS, it's $388 an hour. So call it $380,000 a year, and he's making $500 to $600. So what accounts for the difference? Well, incentives and per diems can add up to a significant sum of money. And so you'll really want to make sure that you understand that stuff when trying to figure out how much money you're going to be able to earn. So up next, let's talk about some disadvantages of cargo. So this is going to be a short section because try as I might, I really couldn't find any major disadvantages. I initially thought that, if you're going to fly cargo, there's a really good chance you're going to fly back of the clock. In other words, the graveyard shift. And back of the clock for an extended period of time, years, is not good for your body and for your health. But again, the captains that I spoke to, they said, well, that back of the clock flying is really going to be dependent on the type of flying that you choose to do. Whether you're doing domestic or international travels can have a significant impact on that. So that sort of dispelled the myth in my mind that cargo was going to lead to a lot of back of the clock flying. Now, if you know of some other disadvantages of flying cargo, I would love it if you would take a moment and leave those down in the comments for others to read, and thank you very much for doing that. So here in North America, the best known cargo companies are FedEx, UPS, DHL, Prime, and to a lesser degree, a company called Atlas Air, which you may or may not have heard of. And outside of North America, there are plenty more, and I'll put a link down in the description to the article that's on the screen right now where you can see all those other companies in case you might want to apply for jobs with any of them. For each of the companies that I've mentioned, the best way to find out if they're currently hiring or not is to just visit their careers page. So now I want to take a moment to talk about single pilot operations. Now, I wasn't able to uncover a lot of information about this because it's still pretty far off depending upon who you talk to. So for example, the consensus seems to be that the cargo airlines would go single pilot before the passenger airlines because passengers might be less motivated to buy a ticket, for example, if they know that the planes are flown only by a single pilot. So in cargo, again, it's an unknown at this point in time, but what I can tell you is the obstacles that they have to overcome is, one, the planes have to be designed for it. The pilot unions are obviously going to be very, very against single pilot. Insurance companies are probably not going to be very excited about single pilot because there's no benefit to them for having it take place, and the insurance companies really have a great deal of control in aviation. And the FAA is going to have all sorts of hoops for the companies who are applying for single pilot operations to jump through, so it's not going to be easy. My guess is the technology to make it possible is going to be available far, far longer than it's actually going to happen to your career. So at this point in time, I don't have a really strong opinion one way or the other than to say I think that there's quite a number of years ahead of us yet before single pilot operations, if ever, becomes something that could cut jobs. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about a company called Atlas Air, and I'm bringing them into the video as opposed to FedEx and UPS and DHL because those companies are very well known. You can go to their website, you can get a lot of information, but unless you really dove into cargo, you might not know that Atlas existed. And a friend of mine works there, and he was kind enough to share quite a bit of information about what working there is like. So first of all, let's talk a little bit like what is Atlas and what do they do? Well, Atlas Air provides services to a variety of clients, including airlines, e-commerce and express, freight forwarders, manufacturers, entertainment groups, the US military, professional football teams, and so forth. They fly a lot of different stuff to a lot of really interesting places. They're the second largest aircraft operator, and they operate in more than 400 destinations in 90 countries, and they offer a variety of aircraft, including the 747, the 777, the 767, and the 737, although the 737 is going away because they don't have a contract, or they lost the contract that they had with Prime. They have a new CEO as of June of 2023, a guy by the name of Michael Steen. He's been with the company for 16 years, never a pilot, always an executive. I learned that you cannot take they can't take restricted ATP pilots because of the type of flying that they do. So if that's you, you might want to make sure that you really understand that before considering applying there. And then they have a new letter of agreement that came out and it affects 401k contributions. So if you're interested in retirement planning, there's some stuff that you may not find on their website just yet. And the first point is that direct contributions to increase to 14% for 2025 and 16% for 2026. And it used to be just a 2% direct contribution with a match of 10%. So this aligns the 401k comp with American, Delta, and United. The other thing is something they call Gateway. So the company pays up to $1,250 in international airfare one way to get pilots to their departure base in coach class only. And extra is paid by the employee. So if your airfare is more than $1,250, you've got to cough in the difference. Domestic is 100% covered. Both are coach class only. And if the first leg is a deadhead, this is paid as a work day. If commuting on an off day, then it's unpaid. So if you're one of those folks who hey, I want to live in some remote area in North America, then you're going to be in relatively good stead to have them pay for your flight to get you to work. So the loss of Amazon did have a large effect on the company. This caused a training backup, and that's why hiring has been paused. So according to my friend that works there, you can expect hiring to restart in 2025. And as I learned about UPS when I was doing my research call with the captains there, they are actively hiring first officers as of the filming of this video. Atlas is expected to have new contract negotiations start in December of 25. They are a little behind the curve right now in pay, but one would expect that will get rectified in these new contract negotiations. So requirements to be an Atlas first officer. So all of this is available on their careers page on their website, but basically it comes down to the minimum of 1,000 hours of fixed wing, 500 hours of fixed wing under FAR Part 121 or Part 135, 250 PIC hours of fixed wing for military flight training graduates. Must meet the required minimum of 1,500 hours of total time, with the exception of 1,250 hours with qualifying 2-year aviation university program, or 1,000 hours with a qualifying 4-year aviation university program, or 750 hours of military flight training graduates. So now let's talk a little bit about the benefits of being a first officer at Atlas. And this was one of the things that my friend who works there really called out, because he loves the flying he gets to do. So being a first officer with Atlas, he describes it as a job like no other. And you get to do all sorts of things, and you get to do it in really interesting places. So as I mentioned earlier on, he's flown sports teams, he's flown military stuff, he's flown animals like elephants and lions and tigers, and he's gone to some really far away places and had some amazing experiences. So that's one of the things that he thinks is pretty cool. Now on Atlas's website, you can also read up that they provide tickets for your commute. For those living more than 130 miles from their base, there's all sorts of business class and domestic and international traveling available while deadheading, if greater than 4.5 hours. There's the 64-hour minimum monthly pay guarantee, which is one of the things that will probably go up when the new contract is negotiated. And there's premium pay available when flying on days off. And there's a variety of schedules across the different fleet types. And then employee benefits, they have a profit sharing plan, they have basic life and accidental death insurance, they have long-term disability, retirement contributions, as I mentioned earlier on, paid sick leave, travel benefits, and various voluntary benefits, including critical illness, pet insurance, and so forth. And again, to learn much more about that I'm conveying in the video, I would strongly encourage you to go to their website. Now let's talk a little bit about pay rates. So first officer pay scale is about $100 per hour across whatever airframe you're assigned to, and captains in the first year on the 777 are making $239, on the 747 it's $246, and on the 767 it's $233, according to Airline Pilot Central. So these pay numbers I got from Airline Pilot Central, and I believe them to be accurate, but as I mentioned on several occasions during this video, make sure that you do your own due diligence. So that's my overview and update for the cargo opportunity video. I'm sure there's a lot more that I could have covered. but that would make for a very, very long video. So if you're someone with some cargo experience, I would love it if you wanted to share that experience with others just down in the comments below. I want to thank you very much for watching this video. If this is your first time, you may want to consider liking and subscribing. And also, if you'd like to get notifications of in your inbox of future long form videos that I produce like this one, just go on over to flywithtrent.com, join the email list, and you'll get those notifications in your inbox. Thanks very much, everybody. It's a pleasure to have you here, and I'll see you soon in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.